Obviously, this is going to be a big election, an unprecedented election, given the number of mail-in ballots we are expecting. What are your biggest concerns as we move into this election now, 3 months away?
So, my biggest concerns, there's so many. I would say the few that I focus on the most. On the one hand, it's that, especially now that we're in the middle of this pandemic and everybody's home more than ever, and everybody's reliable on the internet more than ever, it's how much of this is going to play out on social media, how much distrust is going to be sown in the process, how much confusion intentionally so by some political operatives. That is a big concern in terms of how the people are going to trust the election, trust the process, trust the outcome. And then, of course, separately, there's the big concerns about how mail-in voting is going to work, especially when we have a president who keeps tweeting and posting about how we shouldn't trust that process. So these are some of the biggest concerns about how to really help ensure that we still have an election that we can trust and that's not manipulated.
Counting the ballots is going to take time, so we may not know who wins once again on election night. You recently participated in a war game simulation in a contested Trump and Biden election. You played the role of social media. What did you learn from that?
Yeah, so that was really interesting. This organization called the Transition Integrity Project hosted this, and it was, we really broke up into camps. Some people played Biden, some people played Trump, and it was a lot of actually big sort of Republicans and Democrats, and I played social media. And the few key takeaways, we went through different scenarios of what might happen. It was a November 3rd onward scenario planning, and what might happen if it's a close election, what might happen if Biden wins by a lot or if Trump wins by a lot, and there were different scenarios. For me, playing the social media role, part of what really concerned me was, while a lot of the sort of political operatives were thinking very much in political terms and thinking about how past elections have gone and some of the scenarios that might go wrong, I think that a lot of the element of how this plays out online and on social media was a bit newer for people and a bit more concerning, at least to me it was. And so, what's interesting is normally from my background, in terms of my national security background, you always plan for the worst and hope for the best, right? So you go to the absolute worst case scenario, which is close contested election, no results for weeks, possibly, according to some of the scenarios, a president that refuses to concede, things blow up on social media, nobody knows what to trust. And then you build out all the ways to mitigate against that, as opposed to just saying, oh, there's no way that's going to happen, that's too extreme. So I do think there's a lot of concern from a lot of different people that we could get to a point where November 3rd hits. Americans are very used to getting their election results on election night. It takes a few weeks between counting the mail-in ballots and trying to keep people calm. And meanwhile, we continue to have political operatives, including our president, tweeting and posting on Facebook that it's been stolen, it's illegitimate, starting to call to some of his supporters to go out in the streets. There's a lot of really potentially scary scenarios.
Now, as you alluded to, Facebook is an incredibly important player here, and the integrity of the election on Facebook. You have worn a lot of hats in your career. You've been a national security advisor to Vice President Biden. You worked for the CIA. You said actually the most difficult job of your career was working in elections integrity at Facebook. Tell us about that experience. I know it was short-lived. You worked there for just 6 months. What was that experience like, and what did you learn from it?
Sure. So when I said it was most difficult, I don't know if I would say it was the most difficult. I definitely had a much more challenging time in the national security world, but it was difficult to try to bring the type of analysis I would have been bringing, which is really looking at what are the key issues, what are the systemic issues, what's happened, why is our platform being manipulated by, at the time it was Russian and foreign operatives. Now we see the same thing happening with domestic actors. And what can we do to really ensure this doesn't happen? And the reason it was really difficult is that I come from a world, again, where you plan for the worst case scenario and then you go through every step of trying to mitigate difference to make sure that scenario doesn't happen. Whereas at Facebook, for example, when I tried to highlight, actually, my team tried to highlight plans for combating voter suppression in political advertising, the answers we would get back were very sort of tech driven. It was, well, what's the scale? Are we already seeing this on the platform? And I kept trying to explain, no, I'm projecting what might happen so that we can ensure we are protecting the platform and Americans against this possibility. And that's where we bumped heads a lot, because it was very reactionary. It was, there's a press scandal right now over X, Y, or Z. What can we do to build in a quick fix to make sure something that we can scale globally? And that, to me, is not what's going to protect against the real threats we're talking about now.